That was the sound of Yellowjacket, Cherry Audio's latest and wonderful sounding virtual instrument. My name is Tim Shoebridge, and as always, it's a huge pleasure and an honour to be able to give you a rundown of their latest product offering. In this case, it's a faithful sonic emulation as well as a reimagining of the EDP Wasp, a little analog monosynth that dates back to 1978. Now, the original Wasp from EDP, it was designed from the ground up to be a highly affordable entry-level synthesizer for aspiring musicians. It was instantly recognisable by its yellow and black livery. Now, to keep the costs down, the casing of the synthesizer was just made from a tough plastic. The design inside was very simple, everything fitted on one single circuit board, and it had a rather rudimentary capacitive keyboard. It did have some quite advanced features for such a cheap synthesizer of the day. We'll cover those features a bit later on in this video, but it was the sound of the Wasp that got it noticed in the late 1970s. It ended up being used by quite a few well-known artists and bands, people like Dave Stewart, Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran, Stranglers, The Cure, and even Tears for Fears, amongst many others, had the Wasp in their studios. Right, let's start over on the left hand side with these controls on the front panel and work our way across to the right. First of all, the keyboard section. Some basic controls here for controlling the synth as a whole. We've got a glide control, we've got an octave range for controlling the keyboard's octave range, and then we have a number of voicing modes. Now obviously the EDP Wasp, the original Wasp, was a monosynth, so we have that mode here. But of course we would expect Cherry Audio to go further than that, wouldn't we? They've given us a unison mode, and we've got the choice of 4, 8 or 16 voices for unison. That's 4, 16 sounds absolutely massive. And we have a detune control. And of course we have poly mode as well, up to 16 voices. There are other voicing modes which we will cover later on because I think they are absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to kind of save the best till last. We'll talk about those multi-modes later on. Let's move on though to the oscillators. So we've been hearing just one oscillator so far, playing a sawtooth. Now the original EDP Wasp, 1978, synthesizers around that kind of time, they had very few waveforms generally. Here we've just got sawtooth and a square wave. That was very, very common. Now what Cherry Audio have done is they've given us a third waveform here. This third waveform, it's called enhanced waveform, and there's a bit of a history behind this waveform. So the original EDP Wasp was released, as I said, in 1978, and straight afterwards EDP worked on its little brother called the Gnat. It was even smaller and even more affordable than the Wasp. It only had one oscillator, but to give it some beef, a bit of welly, and make it sound bigger, they actually created a waveform which was constantly being modulated. Its pulse width was being modulated, and so that's what we have here. Cherry Audio have given us that waveform here in Yellowjacket. It sounds like this. So you can hear that it's slowly being modulated. It sounds almost like two oscillators very slightly detuned from one another. So we have that enhanced wave from the Gnat, we have square wave, and we have sawtooth. Now the square wave on oscillator number 1, you can change its pulse width. and you can modulate it. And the modulation is coming from this LFO over here. We'll cover that in a little while. You can't change the pulse width of the square wave with oscillator number 2. But let's bring in oscillator number 2. Here's the mixer section, very simple. We've got noise as well. Now in terms of oscillator number 2, we have got the ability to detune it, as you'd hope. The range is rather strange, with a rhyme there. It goes -10 semitones and +4 semitones. It's a bit odd. We do have hard sync, so we can sync hard sync between oscillators 1 and 2. Those classic hard sync sounds. But in the original EDP Wasp, you couldn't modulate the pitch of oscillator number 2. You just had to sort of like set it to what you wanted it to sound like, or twiddle with the knob. Now with Yellowjacket, what we can do is we can right click it, choose MIDI learn, and then we can apply any MIDI controller we like, such as the mod wheel for example, to modulate this. So there is a way to do it with obviously modern technology and virtual instruments that you couldn't do with the original EDP Wasp. Right, so we've covered the mixer section. Let's move on to the control oscillator, as it's called here, LFO as we know it. Now we've covered one of the modulation destinations already, which is the pulse width of oscillator number 1. But we have some other destinations. As we can see here, we can modulate pitch, which is the pitch of both oscillators together. Got amplitude, and we've got filter cutoff. Now you can either just have the modulation occurring constantly like this, or you can have it under mod wheel control, which is what this little control here is for. Turning on mod wheel control. A few little advanced features of the oscillator. It's free running, but we can also re-trigger it every time we hold down a key for the first time. So if we hold down one key, it re-triggers. If we hold down subsequent keys, it won't re-trigger until we let everything go and then start again. And because we've got a range of different waveforms, such as sawtooth, reverse sawtooth, and square wave, we can use the LFO as a kind of rudimentary envelope generator, basically. Or a loopable envelope generator, as it really is. What else can we say? Well, yes, as well as those basic waveforms for the LFO, we have noise. Some sort of crunchy modulation. Let's modulate the filter. And we've got random, as it's called here, which is sample and hold. Okay, onto the star of the show, in my personal opinion, the filter. I've got to say, I've fallen in love with the filter inside Yellowjacket. I think it is the best sounding filter in any virtual instrument I've played in a very, very long time. I love it. It's just got so much character, but yet it's musical. It never loses that musicality, if that is a word. Alright, so what is the filter? In the original EDP Wasp, it's a 2-pole, that's a 12 dB per octave, 2-pole multi-mode filter, which was very unusual for a little monosynth that was so cheap back then in 1978. You had low pass, band pass and high pass modes. It's a 2-pole filter, but it is resonant. It never self-resonates, so you can't play the filter. And I think it's because it doesn't self-resonate that it never loses that kind of musical, beautiful capability. Let's have a little listen to it. I'm just going to play a little arpeggio. Right, we are in low pass mode here. Let's do a little filter sweep. Let's start adding some resonance, which is called Q. That already sounds wonderful. Let's keep on going. That's a maximum resonance. Hear that? It's gorgeous. It really is gorgeous. Alright, let's go and try out the band pass. Again, let's whack up the resonance. Play another note in a minute. It's getting boring, isn't it? Now, Cherry Audio have added notch. It wasn't there in the original Wasp, but we've got it here. Notch tends to sound sort of more obvious with low resonance. Let's modulate it with the LFO. And lastly, high pass, which again is a resonant high pass. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Okay, on to the envelope generators. We have two of them. They're dedicated, one for the VCA and one for the filter. They are standard ADSRs, but they have advanced features. They are loopable, which is really, really cool. You see here the VCA, the sustain level. We turn it all the way down and absolutely off. Now we start to repeat, and the amount of repeat, or the frequency of the repeat, is determined by this control here. Exactly the same with the filter envelope, except that we have a delay control, which is another advanced feature. So you can delay the onset of the envelope kicking in after pressing down your key, and again, if you have that delay all the way down to below 0, you can see there's 0 there, that's the no delay at all, but then just below 0 we have the repeat feature kicking in, and here we have a control for that too. So you can get all sorts of offsetting rhythms with these two envelope generators, and of course you've got the LFO as well, so you've got 3 loopable modulation sources, which is really, really cool. Now what Cherry Audio have done is taken it to the next level, as they always do with their instruments. As well as being able to control the speed manually like this, we've got MIDI sync option, so we can synchronize the filter envelope loop frequency, we can synchronize the VCA envelope loop frequency, we can synchronize the LFO as well to MIDI clock, and then we can synchronize the effects, which we'll have a look at next, such as the delay and the modulation effects. So everything can be synced to clock. We've got an arpeggiator built in here as well. It really is an incredible sound design tool for, you know, sort of like faster, heavy beat, dance floor kind of music, or for creating some really fascinating ambient soundscapes with repeating modulations going on inside. Really, really fantastic. Let's switch to the effects section and the arpeggiator section. Now you'll see top right we have 2 buttons. We're currently in edit mode, which is the main synth parameters that we're editing, what we can see right now. If we click on this ARP FX button, the screen changes, and as you can see we have a load of multi-effects and the arpeggiator over here on the left hand side. Now a lot of these multi-effects, we'll have seen them in previous instruments from Cherry Audio. We have a number of different reverb effects, we've got a number of different delays, we've got some modulation effects, we've got a chorus and a flanger as we would expect, we've got a multi-stage phaser as well. Let's talk about the things that are new here that we haven't seen before in a Cherry Audio instrument. We've got this octafuzz effect here, which is a number of different distortion effects. We've got tube, fuzz and saturation. Let's just have a very, very quick listen to those. We've got this drive control for controlling the amount. I'm just going to whack it up to maximum, and we've got a mix control, dry or wet. So let's go fully wet, whack up the drive. This is what my preset sounds like at the moment with no distortion at all. Let's listen to tube. Fuzz. They're really nice subtle effects, they're not too crazy. Saturation. The more notes I play, you can hear that the saturation is kicking in there, and I've got it turned down quite a lot actually. Now there's an option here called clean, so why would you want this effect on but not hear any distortion? Well, that's because of these other controls down here that we've got. We've got a tone control, so if you want to just take your existing preset, you don't want to add any distortion to it, but you want to control the overall tone, maybe just get some of those low end tones out of the way, or actually make it beefier in the bottom end, we've got a tone control for that. So this is top right, brightest sound, and bassiest sound. So that's really useful to have that. I use that a lot in my presets, just to sort of like do a little bit of final sculpting. And then this is a really fascinating option here. We've got this octave control. It's set to 0 by default, but it can go -1 or -2. And what this is going to do is introduce a sub-oscillator effect, basically. I mean, obviously it's an effect, so it comes after the filter, but we get this effect here. And we can go even lower. Right, to the left of Octafuzz, this just blew my mind when I found this. Now, the original EDP Wasp, it was a small little plastic case synth, very lightweight, and what EDP had done with it was actually make it incredibly portable. So portable, in fact, that you can actually turn it upside down, put some batteries inside it, and take it anywhere and just play it off of batteries. An analog monosynth that you could play with batteries, I think that was pretty much unheard of back in 1978, so it was a unique feature. And to enable this portability, it had a speaker built into it, a pretty crappy speaker, but it was there. And you can see it here. Cherry Audio have given us the graphic of this speaker top left. Now what they've done is also given us an effect, so we can get the sort of like the grungy sound of that speaker. Let me turn it on. Now, without playing any notes at all, we've got two controls here. We've got hiss and we've got hum. This is what hum sounds like. It just sounds like so many of my old synthesizers. It really does. It's brilliant. And we've actually got two frequencies, so you can run it at 50 Hertz or 60 Hertz, depending on where you live and what mains you have. I'm not used to hearing that. I'm used to hearing 50 Hertz. So you've got this hum control. It's absolutely wonderful. And then we've got a hiss as well on the top. It's absolutely brilliant. It blew my mind. I mean, I just have that on so many times. And of course you can use that as a sound effect to whatever you're playing. You don't have to be playing the Yellowjacket. It's great. You'll see when it's on, because this little microphone appears here to show you that it's using the speaker effect. So if you're back here and you're loading presets and you're playing around and you wonder what that hiss or that hum is that's going on, it's not your faulty wiring. It's the fact that we've got the speaker emulation going on here. Right, let's talk about the Arpeggiator. We're going to find a couple of new features on this Arpeggiator that we've not seen in a Cherry Audio product before. Really very cool, subtle little sort of like additions to an Arpeggiator. Alright, so here it is on the left hand side. We've got all the controls that we would normally expect. We've got controlling the Arpeggiator, what kind of mode it's in. We've got up, down, up and down. We've got the octave range that it spreads itself across. We've got a speed control. We've got a control as to whether or not we want to sync it to MIDI clock, which is what I'm doing here. I'm running it inside my DAW because I want to turn on the click track so you can hear the exact timing. We've got a gate control, so we can have control over the gate. It's not going to do very much with this sequence I've got going on here because I've got such a tight decay on the preset I'm playing. We've got a swing control, which is the normal way of affecting the sort of like the rhythm of the Arpeggiator, but we've got now here two new controls, one called Chance and one called Humanize. Let's talk about Chance first. This is adding some probability into whether or not notes get played. It's really nice to see it in software because so many hardware sequences these days have got probability built into them. So all the way around to the right, we've got 100% probability, 100% chance of notes being played, which is what a normal ARP would sound like. But as I bring it back, randomly it's going to start dropping out notes based on the probability that we've set, which is probably around 60-70% here, 70 something, yeah. So all the way around to the minimum, this is the least probable that we're going to hear anything. You still get something, but it's better to have it in sort of like subtle amounts. Well, I think so anyway. It's a really nice thing to have, as I say. A lot of hardware sequences these days tend to have probability options built into them. So that's the Chance. The next one here is Humanize, which I didn't realise was already sort of like turned on. By default it's at 0, which is on the beat. Let me turn on the click of the door so you can hear. So the more I move this control to the right, the more positive it becomes, then the more randomly the Arpeggiator will play notes late after the beat. Whereas if I move it to the left, negative, then more likely, randomly, it's going to start playing notes before the beat. So let's just have a little play around with that so you can hear the difference. It's subtle, but that sounds like how I play. And then the other way. You get the idea. Again, I think subtle amounts of it are best, but it adds that little bit of human feel. It is random in how it works. I think these are really cool features to add to the Arpeggiator. Okay, so before we leave this FX and Arpeggiator section behind and move on to other things, one last thing that I want to point out, and it's, I believe, new in a Cherry Audio product. We have a dedicated FX out section over here where you can just globally turn on or off all the effects that you may have going on. You can see the little LEDs. When I turn it off, they all go off. So if you just want to be able to control them all in one go, boom, there you go. Same with this level. This level is a dry wet control global for all the effects, so you can get them all blended in how you want to with this level here. But this control at the bottom here, this is brand new. This is called Stereo Expand. Now, obviously some of the effects have got a stereo nature to them. We've got the reverbs, which is stereo. We've got the ping pong delay, for example. Chorus is a stereo, etc. But this is actually a way of increasing the stereo feel of the effects that you've got applied at any point in time. Let me give you a brief demo of that. So I've got a real sort of like gentle pad going on here. I've got some effects, I've got some reverb going on, I've got a delay, I've got a chorus, I've got a phaser, I've actually got lots of things going on here. It sounds like this. And that is obviously, it's got some stereo width to it already because of those effects. But as I turn up this expand control, we'll find that that gets accentuated. As opposed to one more time, let's whack it up. It's a really cool feature to have. It all depends, obviously, its effect all depends on what effects you've got going on anyway within your patch. But it's great to have. Okay, let's move on. Let's switch back to the main edit page. Before we get on to the sort of like the final thing that I really want to spend a little bit of time demoing to you, I'm not going to cover this in detail, but you can see here this is sort of like persistent on the front panel no matter what view we're looking at. We see this section down here, it's called keyboard pressure. This is mono Aftertouch as well as poly Aftertouch support. We've got quick controls here to dial in the modulation of the Aftertouch that you apply. We can affect the volume positive or negatively, the pitch of the synth positive or negatively, the filter cutoff positively or negatively. Mod wheel means that we can positively, I can't even speak anymore, positively or negatively affect the mod wheel modulation that we may have set up for our patch. So if you remember with the control oscillator, the LFO here, if we've got this switched on, then it means whatever modulations we've got set up here are controlled by the mod wheel. And if we do that, then we can use Aftertouch to be a surrogate, if you like, for our mod wheel to apply it. And that can obviously be on a per note basis if you've got a poly Aftertouch enabled keyboard. And if those modulation destinations are not enough for you, you can control the reverb amount, which is a really cool effect to be able to sort of press down and get that reverb to kick in. Obviously that is a mono effect or a global effect, is affecting all of your notes at the same time. And if that is not enough, we've got an assign control here where you can actually click on this little sort of down arrow and you can choose one of all these various destinations as a modulation destination for mono Aftertouch or poly Aftertouch. Really powerful feature to have it here in this section. The last thing I just want to mention down here, in terms of the keyboard itself, you can set the root note of this particular keyboard here. You can set the scale. We've got a chromatic scale at the moment, but you've got a number of different choices here, and those can affect your ability to do transpose as you're playing arpeggios. Really cool. And finally, we've got control over pitch bend, the range of the pitch bend, how high and low the pitch bend will work when you apply your pitch bend wheel. What I really want to cover now, the last part that I want to cover, is to come back to these keyboard modes. Remember right at the beginning I talked about the mono, the unison and the poly modes. Well, there are a bunch of other modes that I want to talk about. We'll just cover this last one here called cycle before we get onto the really cool stuff. Now, Poly is a mode where you specify the number of voices, 4, 8 or 16. You can see the little LEDs down here to show you the allocation of voices as you play. Now Poly mode will seek out a free voice and use it. So you're only going to start stealing voices when you've literally held down 16 keys. Obviously you could have a sustain pedal going on there and be playing around with less than 16 fingers, but it's only once you start to have 16 notes all used up you're going to start getting note stealing. Whereas the cycle mode is cycling through those voices sequentially, no matter whether they are in use or not. So you are likely to get voice stealing, and it's an interesting mode to use if you're playing sequences where you actually want to get some predictable note stealing going on. And so that's cycle. Now cycle really comes into its own with these multi-modes. Now before I talk about these multi-modes, let's just go back one last time to the EDP Wasp and talk about a feature on it which really was revolutionary at the time in 1978. I'm full of nostalgia when I talk about the EDP Wasp, because when I was a young teenager it was the very first commercial synthesizer that I ever played. I didn't own one, I didn't have any money, but I was able to play one. But also it's an incredibly important synthesizer for British synthesis. Chris Huggett was the sort of like the technical brains behind EDP and behind the Wasp. He developed the Wasp, he developed the Nat, and EDP had a couple of other products as well. They had a hardware sequencer called the Spider, and they had a controller keyboard, like a MIDI controller keyboard, just a dumb keyboard, a controller keyboard, and that was called the Caterpillar, I believe. Now, to find out how all these things interacted, let's take a look at the front panel of an original EDP Wasp. You'll see there are two connectors on the front panel. They look very similar to MIDI connections, don't they? They're DIN connectors. They are 7-pin DIN connectors. One is an in and one is an out. Very, very similar to MIDI, of course. They are a serial interface. Again, very, very similar to MIDI. And what those did, and they call link there, as you can see, what this link connectivity did was allow different EDP instruments to talk to one another, just like MIDI allows instruments to talk to each other today. So what you could do is you could link up to 4 synthesizers, so that could be 4 Wasps or combination of Wasps and Nats, and you could drive those 4 synthesizers from the controller keyboard, the Caterpillar keyboard, or from the hardware sequence, the Spider sequencer. It was an incredible sort of groundbreaking technology that was inside these EDP instruments, and it was in 1978, which is a full 5 years before MIDI actually was invented, and we saw the first MIDI enabled synthesizer in 1983, I believe it was. Now obviously Yellowjacket, a modern plug-in to your DAW, you can run it standalone. It's got full MIDI capabilities built into it, right? You can run up as many instances of it if you want to and play them all together. Of course, it's MIDI enabled. But what Cherry Audio have done is to add the link capabilities that the original EDP Wasp had and build it inside Yellowjacket. And it's done that with these last 3 modes here within the keyboard section. If I switch to any one of these 3 modes, what you see is that magically down the bottom here we have 3 little baby virtual Yellowjackets appear. you'll see actually this one here, the main one, the one that we were running, is labeled number 1, number 2, number 3 and number 4. So internally Yellowjacket is going to be linking those 4 Yellowjacket synth engines together to give you the kind of capabilities that the original EDP LINK capability would provide. Now these are little mini individual Yellowjackets. They don't have all of the controls available to you that the main one has, but they do have a set of 5 controls here where you can set up some variation. They're all going to be playing the same patch, but you can vary the patch that they're playing with these 5 controls each. You can vary individually the pitch of each of these virtual Yellowjackets. You have got the ability to control the pan, the filter frequency, the VCA, envelope, attack and release. So you can come up with some variation, either subtle variations or very unsubtle variations between each of these virtual synth engines that we have here. And this is where the sort of like the cycle mode really kicks in, because with cycle mode, as I press a key, first time I'm going to be playing synth engine number 1, then I'm going to play synth engine number 2, then I'm going to play synth engine number 3, and then I'm going to play synth engine number 4. So if I create some real obvious sort of differences between these synth engines and say play an arpeggio for example, then with each note you'll hear those variations, the kind of thing that you'd get with say a Korg monopoly for example, where you can create very different sort of settings on each of the 4 oscillators and get those kind of really interesting sort of textures and rhythmic sounds. So what I'm going to do here with this particular patch, which is a sort of like a very soft pad sound, I'm going to use now the pan control. With everything I've done so far, the pan control has been center, but I'm going to move it far left for synth engine number 1. I'm going to move it far right for number 2, far left for number 3 and far right for number 4. So now when I play, you get that far right panning, and this is like a pan spread control on a sequential synth with everything fully panned left and right. So if I play some chords, you get that huge stereo width to the sound. Obviously I could be subtle with it, I could bring in these pan controls in. I could do some subtle detune and get a little bit of detune between each of these voices, or I could actually, move it a number of semitones up or down to create whatever effect that I want. If you want to, you can just go to any one of these virtual synth engines down here, click on the little down arrow that we've got there, and there are some sort of like built-in presets that you can play around with. You can hard pan everything, hard pan but slightly detuned, needs a service, so everything's a bit different. You get the idea. You've got these different presets to automatically set all these sort of like little rotary encoders here to what you want to get some really wonderful sounds. And this is all just inside one instance of the Yellowjacket plugin. Obviously you can then with MIDI create as many of these and stack as many of these up as you like to come up with some incredibly huge, amazing soundscapes, textures, or massive great leads and basses, whatever you want to do. This really does open up the sonic capabilities of Yellowjacket. I absolutely love it.